Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another hour of Garden Hour. Again, our updated format for the garden line that many of you do recall being on television for many years. And again, this is kind of our modern version, learned from COVID, that yes, indeed, life can exist in Zoom. So again, we have a great group of panelists. In fact, we have a lot of panelists tonight. So we're going to go through a lot more segments, a little shorter. But to start out with, my name's John Ball. I'm the Extension Forestry Specialist here at South Dakota State University, as well as the Forest Health Specialist for the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about a little bit on emerald ash borer because they're flying, a little bit more on watering because that's essential, and then a couple of other problems because we're seeing a drought. And then after me, well, let's talk about turf. So, Brett?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John. My name is Brett Owens. I work with Extension Turf, and thanks for having me on. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're all thinking. Drought. How do we take care of our grass when it's this incredibly dry out? Hopefully answer some of those questions as well. I'm very, very happy to introduce our next panelist, a former student and is now working for Extension, Anna Barr.
Hi, yes, my name is Anna Barr, and I just started a position with SDSU Extension a couple weeks ago as the Farm to School Nutrition Field Specialist. So I'll be talking about a project that I actually did a year ago when I was a grad student called Grow Getters. It's a garden education series that's virtual for youth and families.
Okay, and then of course, we're also joined by Christina from McCrory Gardens, who will be coming on at somewhere about the 1:30 to bring us up to date on what's going on at McCrory Gardens. And then, of course, we're going to finish out the evening with Rhoda. So, Rhoda, what are you going to chat about tonight?
Talk about potatoes tonight. We've been getting a lot of questions about potatoes, I've noticed on social media and in the hotlines. So we'll talk a little bit about those.
All right. Well, that's great. And yeah, potato talk is fantastic because after we finish up with this, I'm going to Five Guys for large fries. But you know what? Maybe that's not the potato you're talking about. But anyway, tonight I'm going to start out with a little bit of where we are at in terms of development. So Amanda, who's always with us or generally with us, and she'll be here to also answer bug questions. If she can have my first slide, please. And there we go. What you're looking at here is a linden tree, the flowers of a linden tree. And I get calls about it this time of year. First of all, they're in bloom now. And the flowers are spectacular. And they perfume the air. If you're walking through almost any neighborhood from Spearfish, Rapid City, Pier, I find them there. There's a couple in Murdo. Mobridge has some huge ones. Almost anywhere in the state, you can find lindens. And they bloom about the third week of June. Now, this year, they're just about on schedule. In other words, it cooled down in May there, but then, as everyone knows, June was hot and we rapidly gained ground again. And so we're right about where we normally are in growing degree days. Now, of course, we're a little dry this year, but at least in terms of plant development, we're right about where we typically are getting into that last week of June. Well, my next slide shows something else that's kind of important at that last week of June, and that's the little emerald ash borer. That's my hand in an emerald ash borer. It gives you an idea of scale, if you will. When lindens are in bloom, that's where peak emergence occurs. In other words, about half the emerald ash borers that are going to emerge from the tree have emerged and are out flying now. They do live for about 3 to 6 weeks, and they start emerging in early June. So right now, if you want to see an emerald ash borer, now's the time you're most likely going to find them out there flying. Now, by the way, you're not likely to see them. They fly midday from about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. They like air temperatures in the 70s and 80s, and they like it sunny. Pretty nice weather, to be honest with you, but typically you're going to find them in the upper canopies of trees, not lower. And so you might say, how did I capture this one? Well, by the way, this one's dead. And how I captured this one, it's on a tree that was treated. And the leaves now contain that insecticide in it. And if mom eats, and that's a mom, if she eats the leaf, she dies. And so we kill her before she even lays eggs. And that's why we strongly recommend that people that are going to have their trees treated, treat them in early June, late May, early June, so that not only will we kill the larvae after they hatch in July or even in early August, we're going to kill mom before she even lays eggs. And that's always the best. And just as a reminder for everyone watching, we are only recommending that people treat ash trees if you're living in Lincoln and Minnehaha County. A little bit of Turner County would be fine as well, but we don't want to go beyond that because we have not confirmed it beyond that. Notice my choice of words. We haven't confirmed it beyond there. Again, it may be somewhere else. We just haven't discovered it there yet. But next slide. This is what I also see a lot of. And as you can see, this is a very unhappy spruce tree. There's a lot of unhappy spruce trees in the state right now. And a reason why, they don't have enough water. This was a recently planted spruce tree at a cemetery, and it's how appropriate because it's dying. The reason being is they were planted and not watered, and these trees demand watering almost on a daily basis for the first couple of weeks. And so when I go out and look at shelter belts and I look at young trees and the trees are not doing well and wilting and that, the common question is, well, what do I spray? Well, it's H2O. And I understand why people are not aware of that. But right now, trees need a tremendous amount of water and they don't need fertilizer. So my next slide. I did show this last week and at the very end because I came on late. So I did want to elaborate on it today since I have just a little bit more time on it. And that is, if we take a look at a tree, that the total root spread, if we look at all the root system of a tree, typically it goes out about as far as a tree is tall. Now, by the way, that's typical. You sometimes find them going a little farther and you find them going a little shorter. But again, that's generally the entire spread of a tree, a radius equal to its height. However, that's not the area that you have to water. While there are roots out there and they certainly wouldn't mind getting some moisture, the real critical zone for watering is about 1/2 the tree's height. So if you have a 50-foot tall tree, about 25 feet out as a radius, and if you said, oh, it's still pretty big, you can tighten it even more. In other words, what I'm saying is, you really want to put the water near the trunk, and then as you go out, water as far as you can up to about 1/2 its height, but you don't need to go beyond that. Too often I read this, well, you need to water at the edge of the canopy, what we call the drip line, where the water would drip off the canopy. There's no basis to that. You want to water where the highest root density is, and that's always near the trunk. And then as you get further from the trunk, the density decreases. The other item here is you'll see that, look at that 20-inch tree. It needs about 300 gallons each watering. And right now, if we're not getting rain, in some area of the states, such as Brookings, we got a good 1/2-inch soaker this last weekend, and some other areas did as well. And others, Amanda mentioned that Pierre was missed. But nevertheless, if we're getting that, well, you can cut that back a little bit. But about every 5 days, it'd be nice to get about 300 gallons of water for a 20-inch diameter tree. That's its trunk. All right, its diameter of its trunk at about 4.5 feet above the ground. Or if we got an inch of rain, they kind of equal out. And, the question we had apparently late was, well, how much is 300 gallons? Well, on your typical hose, if you got an oscillating sprinkler or some other sprinkling system that's kicking it back and forth, that could be a good hour that it's going to take. Depends on the diameter of your hose, the water pressure that you have, private well or city, and that, a number of other factors. But one of the ways to really check is after you water it, you should be able to push a screwdriver, an old screwdriver, down about a foot into the ground and have it moist. And if you really want to know when to water, well, when that starts to dry out to about a foot, water again. But if we looked at it at about, every 5 days right now, and notice on that 1-inch tree, that's 2 gallons during that time period. Small trees need water too, but right now, the most important thing trees need is water. Now, on my final slide here that Amanda will post, I want to show you a nice maple tree, and this is a true red maple, Acer rubrum, that is struggling down at Dakota Dunes. Now, Dakota Dunes has a wonderful climate for red maples, but it has very poor soils for red maples. This red maple is struggling on a soil with a pH of just under 8, and having done the soil testing there. And on maples, they suffer from chlorosis. In other words, the leaf tissue turns yellow, the veins remain green. Now, there's 2 micronutrients or elements that cause chlorosis. If it's chlorosis on oaks or birch, it's iron chlorosis. In other words, the element that the tree is not able to take up because of the alkaline soils. Well, the problem is our alkaline soils prevents those elements from becoming soluble, so they're not pulled into the tree, or at least adequate amount. If it's maple tree, it can be manganese. And in fact, manganese is often missing more than iron. When I've gone out and actually taken leaf samples of the trees to see what the elements they have in it, sometimes I'll find the maples are a little short in iron, but they're very short in manganese. Now, this year you're seeing more of a problem with this, and we're seeing, I mean, there's brilliant yellow birch, river birch, pin oaks, and maples. And the reason for that is, again, think how dry it's been. The roots aren't really taking up a lot of elements anyway, just because the only way it gets into the tree is it's carried by the water. And so we're seeing more of this. Now, by the way, if your tree looks like this, I'm afraid that's what it's going to look like for the season. There's very, very little you can do now to correct this. There are injections that can be done, but you know what the injections need? They need water. I was out at a homeowner's house in Sioux Falls that they had a commercial company inject it with iron, another tree, and the tree still looked poor. And the reason is they did not water it the night before, so you get good uptake, nor had they been watering their yard. So there was nothing to move the microelements that the company put into the tree. So when people talk and they say, well, can I fertilize my tree? Right now, the last thing most trees is fertilizer. What they really need is water. And if we had a little bit more water, the chlorosis problem would not be as bad as it is. Once the leaves look like that, they rarely green up again. So this year you're going to have to endure some fairly yellow trees. However, next year you can do some treatments, or if we get adequate rains, there are a lot of trees that look usually pretty good, but it's when they have too much water, too little. That's when chlorosis really kicks in. However, if you have a tree that routinely has it, there are products out there available to use. You can find them at garden centers and such. But again, if it's a maple, manganese is the first thing you try, and then iron. And if it's a oak or a birch, then you're going to end up using iron. And I will also mention the poisons in the dose, as they say. We call them microelements because the trees don't need very much of them. So don't overdo it. Don't just assume, well, I'm going to give it extra iron or extra manganese, because the difference between what it needs and what can harm it is not a great difference. So again, follow the mantra of extension, read and follow label directions and follow them exactly. And those treatments are best applied in the spring. Well, that kind of brings up what's going on with the trees. And now I want to turn it over to Brett to talk about turf, and I'll bet he's going to talk about watering as well.
Very, very true. Thank you, John. That was great information. So without a doubt, we're in the middle of a pretty nasty lack of rain and high heat out there, and our lawns are suffering. Getting questions just about every single day. What's happening? What can we do? And you know, is my turf gonna die? And we'll try to address some of that tonight. First of all, I just want to remind everybody, the grass that we've got up here is a cool season grass, which means it prefers the cooler season. It simply tolerates the summer heat that we have up here. Doesn't like it, it tolerates it. And it's constantly in a state of stress when it's having to deal with all these extra dry periods and lack of water. And it's gonna have an effect on it. Another issue that I've noticed recently are a lot of communities are going into water restrictions again because of the drought, and they're not able to give the proper amount of water that a lawn needs during a normal time, which is about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water a week. And so we're trying to figure out, well, what do we do? Is it going to kill everything? Do we need to fertilize it? Do we need to apply lots of water? Just do we need to let it die? Those are the questions that we're getting. And first of all, there's not a lot that we can do about the water restrictions. You know, we want to still try to give it the water that it needs, that inch and a half of water per week. If that can't be done, we need to give it as much water as we can. And I want to reiterate what John had mentioned earlier too. That is so much going to vary depending on different hose sizes, whether you've got a good quality hose, water pressure. There's a lot of things that kind of figure into how long is that going to take to get that amount of water. And John nailed it exactly what I was going to say. It's about an hour to 1.5 hours to get what you need on a lawn right there. So another question I've been getting is, well, do we aerate it? Do we fertilize it here in the summer to help it out? And the answer is no, we don't. Just like with the trees, it's already stressed enough, and without the proper amount of water, those adding those extra things are going to be detrimental as well. So we just have to try to slide through this area, give it as much water as we can. The grass is very similar to the trees. That's really what they need right now is as much water as they can. I noticed in our area, particularly around Brookings, Sioux Falls area, where we did get a little bit of rain last week, the grass responded immediately. You can literally see patches in people's yards where they received heavy amounts of rain, where trees weren't blocking it or whatever the case was. And people are out there wanting to fertilize, and they're wanting to mow it and do whatever they can right now. And I'm just going to urge you all to be very careful with what you're doing there. How do we fix this? That's what everybody wants to know. And first of all, I want to make sure we understand here that even though the blades of the grass are drying out and not surviving, that doesn't necessarily mean that the turf plant itself, the rhizomes in the crown of the plant are typically still going to be alive. I'm not going to tell you that some of them aren't going to die. It's really hot. There's not a lot of water, so you probably are going to have some loss, but it's recoverable at this point anyways. So in the fall, once we get back into some cooler temps, mid-September or so, and we're getting some regular rainfall, then that's when we want to go back into aerating and overseeding and trying to help that new batch of seedlings perch up before the winter time comes. A couple other issues that we've had during the drought, we're seeing a lot of weird insect issues and a lot of bird damage going on. That's very common when we've got drought. Birds are hungry as well, and it's a little bit easier for them to get to some of the food when the grass is stressing enough as it is. So we've seen a lot of pictures of birds burrowing into what's left of grass turf to get a little snack. That's real common. People are asking, well, what do we do about that? Do we spray? And the honest, easiest answer for that, for the birds, is go to Walmart or Target or wherever and get one of those cheap plastic owl scarecrow type things, put it in your yard. That'll help scare off the birds a lot more effectively than some of the other things will in a time like this anyways. A couple other issues that have come up with turf that we're noticing is we're seeing a lot of yellowing, as John was mentioning with some of the trees. It's pretty easy in turf. That's with everything we've got going on right now. It's generally a lack of water and a lack of nutrients it's not able to process. So it's not a end of the world thing by any matter. It could definitely be fixed in the fall, but I do urge you to try to keep as much water on there as you can. And notice if you've got some of your lawn weeds that you typically aren't going to see that are going to be taking over a little bit because of they're a little more acclimated to the heat. We're seeing a lot of field bindweed in yards right now. That stuff's a pain, but it's pretty easy to go out and get rid of, even by hand. So try to keep your lawn as happy as you can given the circumstances. But that's really what I wanted to talk about to address some of the questions that I had. I'd like to welcome Anna again. I know Anna is excited to talk a little bit about the program she did last year, and we're excited to have Anna on this side of the classroom. She was a student of ours for a few years, and good to have you on board.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, so I graduated with a degree in dietetics, and I'm a registered dietitian now, but I did a minor in horticulture. So farm to school is kind of where I see the two come together. And Grow Getters is a project that I worked on a year ago. Grow Getters is a series that consists of lessons and resources to engage youth and families in hands-on at-home activities related to gardening, even without a garden. You can go to the next slide. So this is a project a year ago. We know that the climate was COVID. So we were seeing that families were going home, children were staying at home instead of going to school. Parents were looking for ways to engage their kids with lessons, and kind of needing something to grab and hold on to and just run with that didn't take a lot of preparation time. We also kind of knew within Extension that one of the ways that we reach our communities is through community gardens, and with a limitation to meet and gather, a lot of those weren't happening. And so this was kind of a fairly quick project that got thrown together in the spring and summer of last year to get some garden education activities into homes, even though we weren't able to provide it directly. So it's all virtual, and we designed this specifically kind of for a K through 2 audience, with them in mind. So really your little ones. And then there are some resources then for the adults that would help lead the children through it, to learn more about the topics that are dedicated to each lesson. This was a collaboration between SDSU Extension, myself, and Amy Ladonsky, who is the Master Gardener Coordinator, and a couple others. And then the Master Gardener volunteers across the state really volunteered to help find the content that was in each of our lessons. So definitely a huge shout out to them for a lot of the work that went into providing this in a rather quick manner too. Go to the next slide. So each lesson, there were 6, and they each had many different components. So one being objectives for the lesson, vocabulary, a book, an educational video, an activity related to the topic, a nutrition activity, an art activity, and learn more resources. So these are all compiled for each topic, and parents or caregivers or any adult in a child's life, as you might be thinking about what children are, that maybe you'd want to do this with, could pick and choose each of these, or do all of them. There's quite a few, and some of them would take a little bit of resources. So sometimes, you might choose the things that you have available, or might look ahead and see what you can find. But we did try to keep it with an audience of literally anyone in mind. So most things you don't need a yard for. You could go on a walk if you needed to gather maybe some plants. I think one of the activities was to see what you could gather for different colors of soil or leaves, and kind of get those wet and see what you could paint with them, as an example. But really tried to keep the resources minimal to virtual computer, and then some common household and yard or walking trail items that you could find. Next slide. So we had 6 lessons, and they follow the kind of the progression of a plant's growth from soils all the way to preservation. So we had a lesson on soils, seeds, the plant parts as they grow up, pollinators, harvesting, and then preservation. So if you click on this picture, Amanda, it should take you to a link. Otherwise, I know you have it too. And I'll just kind of show you what you would see on the website. Is it going?
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So you're welcome to go visit this through the URL that you can see here. But I think that the easiest way to find it is just to Google SD State Extension Grow Getters and not have to type in that tedious one there. But it is there if you want to capture that now and write it down while we have it open. But yeah, if you scroll down a little bit, this has the overview and our logo. And then this is what I just saw. And so maybe we can just click on one of these lessons. Plant the seed maybe, or yep, plant powers is good. All right, and so now you can kind of see what you would find in here as you go to navigate for each of the lessons. We've got vocabulary words, again, geared towards kindergarten through second graders. We did our best to make vocab words that are a little technical, make sense to that young audience. And then kind of each one would have a different activity to help learn those vocabulary words related to plant growth. So there's a video. Each of these kind of bring together resources that were online from many sources. We tried our best to use what extension resources we already had. And I'll show you a little bit later about a couple of videos that we did produce ourselves. But so we did the best to use original ideas, but knew that we would have to use some others to make a full and robust series. Without also reinventing the wheel. So these links here and stuff would take you to a video, maybe from a different organization that all talks about the same topic. So here, the plant parts activity shows you the different instructions of what you would need. This mix and match salad nutrition activity. You know, one thing with nutrition is a lot of times we think of what food activity we could do, and really wanting to emphasize here too, trying to find things and ways to incorporate good healthy nutrition and those fruits and vegetables and crops that we grow in our gardens into our nutritious lessons. All right, so that's kind of an example then of what you would see in each of them. And I definitely welcome you to go explore the website and think about what kids you might have in your life that could benefit or enjoy doing these lessons here. And I think I just have one more slide. We had an exciting project towards the end of the summer last year, and Brett, I know, knows about the local Foods Education Center virtual field trip that I put together, and then one with McCrory Gardens also. But these are really fun ways. I definitely invite you after this maybe to go explore. They're 2 5-minute videos that they're geared towards that same kindergarten through second, but could be expanded to broader audience. And it welcomes you into McCrory Gardens. And there we did a walking tour, kind of like a virtual field trip geared towards kids with different vocab words. And she just shows you a lot of the cool and fun stuff that McCrory Gardens has to offer, and we even have that child's perspective there to show the kids what maybe they could see or experience when they go to McCrory Gardens and learn a little bit along the way too. And it's rather short, only 5 minutes, and I think that it could be beneficial to as adults too, that just want to know a little bit more about what there is, especially if we're across the state from Brookings and want a little bit of a sneak peek into what we might find if we came and visited these farms. So then the local Foods Education Center, each of the interns in the photo there, we did a little hide and seek kind of sort of game in the garden, and each intern showed us a different type of plant in a different part of the garden to kind of give exposure to what all there is, and highlighted their favorite crop or their favorite vegetable or fruit or herb or whatever it was, and showed the video what it looks like as a seed and then what it looks like while it's growing, and then gave some fun facts and showed if they could what the product looked like at the end. So I just wanted to get kids kind of interested and engaged in these alternatives to in-person experiences, and those can be found right on the same Grow Getters page online. All right, next slide, I believe, is just my contact information. So if you have any questions beyond tonight or want to connect on anything farm to school related, you can get a hold of me there.
Well, thank you. That was great, and it's certainly nice to have one of our former students back. So appreciate you being here, Anna. Hopefully you can be involved with us later on. Our next speaker is Christina, who is going to update us on what's going on at McCrory Gardens. So I'm sure there's a lot, but I'm sure everything's dry there as well. So Christina, let us know what's going on.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me again. Yeah, the garden's definitely watering has been a top priority. There's definitely, you can tell where the sprinklers don't reach and when it's dry like this, and we have little stands we have to move around and things like that. But we're working hard to keep everything watered and keep everything growing. But yeah, just some things going on too. Just again, the save the dates for garden party August 6th and insect festival in September. And so we're really excited for some of those upcoming activities. And then our children's program is still going on through July too. We're excited to host people for that. And I did want to mention too that the program, the Grow Getters program that Anna was speaking about, was really, really well done and really, really cool stuff in there. And some ideas from that are kind of some of the stuff that we do in our program too. So that was really cool that they put that together for you all. But yeah, come and join us in the garden to do some of our kids' activities too, if you're interested. So you can go on to the next slide. So just some of the things that are in bloom again this week. Again, as every week, I have a hard time picking because there's so many things. But this cashmere sage there on the left, that purple, is a really cool plant that I just don't see everywhere. So I like to point out some of those ones that some common ones, but some that you just don't see everywhere. And that's one of them that is just kind of a neat flower blooming right now. And then a lot of our different species of sedum are blooming as well. And those are really attracting, bees and butterflies and things like that too. So the next slide, please. So another kind of unique one that I like, maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea or cup of wine, but my favorite, but one of my favorite plants out there right now is this wine cups plant. It kind of volunteers itself and self seeds, but it's not ever been problematic. That was never one that we had to, go control the wine cups and weed them out because they're taking over or anything like that. But they do kind of pop up here and there. And they're really beautiful, like spilling over the side of rock walls, and they kind of will lean and kind of climb up some tall plants, but they have that really vibrant kind of magenta flower and sprawly growth habit that, at least myself, I really enjoy that plant blooming right now. And this one is a really neat one, and right behind the visitor center. This is this pink cotton candy stackies. So this pink, it's just this really vibrant pink color. I hope y'all can see there in the slide. It's got a unique little flower shape on it too. But that's growing over in our great perennial bed right behind the visitor center. And all these ones that I've mentioned so far are perennials. I should mention that too. So these are all plants that will come back for you, or should come back for you, I should say, year after year, but these have been around a number of years. But that's not to mention too, there's a lot of annuals out there blooming as well. You can go on to the next one. So again, there's so much. This is a perennial garden. Just yesterday, just in that photo, you can see so many things, like even the grasses are looking really lovely right now, but there's some baby's breath. That's the kind of frothy one in the middle, and the sedum, and that's on the left. That's that wine cups that's kind of spilling over the rocks. And then some Shasta daisies and things like that. Just a lot of stuff blooming and looking really, really beautiful. All those photos were taken just yesterday. So they're all things blooming right now in the gardens. And as I said, I don't have photos in here, but there's a lot of annuals that are just really striking right now too. The zinnias I saw, we posted to Facebook today that were blooming really, 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 really nicely. So definitely come check us out and see what's happening in the gardens. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, I think we're spared for questions right now, Christina.
Okay.
Though again, the gardens look spectacular. Just as a reminder, when is the garden party again?
August 6th. So it's a Friday. And it's kind of that tradition we usually have coffee at 10 a.m. and it's a free day for people to come enjoy the gardens. And then in the afternoon, it's starting at 6, we have our SDSU free as well starting. And then we'll have some tours and things like that in the middle of the day. So there's definitely a fun day to come check out the gardens, music. Absolutely keep that on your calendar. So.
All right. And again, we're going to hope for nice, cool weather. You know, one of those little cold snaps we get in early August that makes us think of fall, something in the 70s or 80s that we've had a light rain. Now, I will say this, because of the lack of rain, there has been a real lack of mosquitoes out of McCrory as well, I've noticed. So
there's a positive side, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, well, you know, trying to keep the positive on this. So yes, for everyone, if you visit the gardens, you'll see plants, they've been watered, but you'll also be, unlike 19 and 18, where it was very wet and we had tremendous mosquito populations and you had to have a blood transfusion at the end of your tour, you're going to find that it's actually pretty nice. We haven't had any mosquitoes really. We're going to jump over to Rhoda now, who's going to talk to us about potatoes. So take it away.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we can see here a progression of potatoes from just the time when the potato tubers are starting to bloom, and you may be starting to see those now, depending on how early you put in your potatoes. And interestingly enough, the color of the flower is usually tied to the color of the tuber. So red potatoes usually have pinkish flowers. The blue potatoes tend to have more purplish flowers, and the white potatoes tend to have white flowers. It's not 100%, but usually is a pretty good indication with her common varieties. So when the potatoes begin to flower is about the same time that these little tubers are starting to form. Don't have to have the flowering to get the tuber formation. They just happen to happen at the same time. So it gives you an idea of, well, when can I start to look for those small new potatoes to dig. Give it a few more weeks, probably. Maybe some of you, if you started earlier, are starting to dig some now. But new potatoes, you could even harvest these little ones if you wanted to, but you're probably going to want to wait till they're a little larger. For new potatoes, we just take them directly from the ground while the plant is still green. So you get that soft skinned, it's not hardened skin like we'll have for the potatoes that we want to keep through the fall and winter. To get that skin to set on the potato, you actually have to have a dead plant. Usually that happens during frost, or sometimes people actually kill the top of the plant in order to force the potato to go ahead and set the skin. And as you can see, we've come across a lot of different colors of potatoes in recent years. So you can have your 4th of July mix here with red, white, and blue. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some common potato problems. And on the left is one that actually has 2 problems. One is potato scab, and that's that those sort of lesions on the potato tuber there. And if you can actually just peel those off. They don't really extend into the tuber too much, but they make it a problem if you're trying to sell potatoes. People look at them and think, well, I don't think I want to buy that potato, and they will not be good keepers either. So, but they're fine just to eat soon after you have harvested them. What causes that is the bacteria, and it can live in the soil for quite some years. It seems to be encouraged by high pH soils, which of course South Dakota has. You can't do too much about that. Manure applications seem to make it worse. And that's probably because the manure can help feed the bacteria that causes a scab on the potato. So you might want to look for other kinds of compost is fine. It's the manure specifically that sometimes can encourage this problem. The other way to avoid it is to choose your potato variety carefully. Most of the newer varieties have at least some resistance to scab. I believe it's Pontiac and Kennebec are a couple older ones that don't have very good resistance. One of the older gold ones, Yukon Gold, does not have very good resistance to it. Usually the thicker skinned red potatoes have more resistance. So some of the Norlands, but if you look at a description, variety description, it will generally tell you if it has good resistance or not. The other problem that we see with that potato is that it's cracking. And here the crack is actually healed over, which it will do. Potatoes are very elastic in how the tubers are formed as the plant is growing. The plant will form a tuber while it's got the resources to do. So, and sometimes if the plant is stressed, it will draw water back out of the tuber, even carbohydrates back out of the tuber if the plant decides it needs it. So these tubers can shrink and expand depending upon how happy the plant is. In this case, if it's a little bit dry in the soil, the tuber stops growing. It kind of sets its skin a little bit. And then once it's watered again, it expands so quickly that just cracks open. Very common with a lot of horticultural crops. And it healed over. So you can still use a potato, it's fine, but it makes it a lot harder to peel a potato like that. So if you see potatoes with cracks that are healed over, very often it's a case of uneven watering. Now, herbicide can do that sometimes too. And I've discovered this week, I'm always learning new things. Herbicide damage can actually, to the plant, can be carried, that herbicide can go into the tuber. When you plant the tuber, you get then a plant that displays herbicide damage. So it can actually go through a couple generations where that herbicide is still persisting and still showing some symptoms. So be aware of that. If you note herbicide damage, you probably, well, in the first place, you may or may not want to harvest those tubers, period, but don't harvest them for seed potatoes because they can carry that herbicide over. The problem on the right is called hollow heart. And actually, there's a number of different diseases that can cause that browning on the inside. But when there's actual space there and not just brown cells, but actually space, that's called hollow heart. And there's a number of things that can contribute to that. One is too much nitrogen. And too much nitrogen actually on your potatoes can cause, like with most other plants, lots of foliage, but not much fruit or not much, it can delay tuber formation. So you don't want to get too carried away with nitrogen. It can cause competition with the nutrients that need to form in the tuber. And so you can get these problems almost kind of like an internal blossom end rot in some ways. So uneven watering can also do this, or not enough potassium. Now, South Dakota soils almost always have very high levels of potassium, so we don't worry about that too much. There are a few areas of cropland that have been very heavily cropped that run short of potassium on the east side of the state. So if you're wondering about it, be sure to have your soil tested. But normally if we're growing in the ground, we have enough potassium. If you're growing in a grow bag or raised bed or something where you're not using the native soil, then that's an issue that you might not have enough potassium and need to add some. So that's all I'm going to say about potatoes right now, unless there are some questions.
Well,
So, Rhoda, there is a question about what's in your Zoom background.
Well, I'll have to admit, this is not this year's yet, but it's a combination of various native, mostly native flowers. We've got some echinacea there, some goldenrod, a couple different kinds of goldenrod. I'm forgetting right now if that's agastache, that's kind of pinkish, and some little blue stem.
well, it certainly looks nice. I mean, that's a better background than mine. I'm looking at a wall in the extension office. Say, we did have a question about, is the chlorosis seen on a viburnum the same as the chlorosis we're seeing on trees? Possibly. And I say possibly because a lot of our viburnums are very tolerant of our alkaline soils, and we rarely see micro element deficiencies, either iron or manganese. Now, iron is a possibility, but when I'm seeing yellowing on our viburnums, it's usually due to one of two reasons. One is it's too dry. And we have a number of them with yellow leaves right now that are dropping them. And again, as a reminder, chlorosis is the blade itself is yellow, but the veins remain green. So if it's all yellowing and a little wilting, you might actually be looking at lack of water. The other one I see a lot of right now are aphids. And aphids do like certain cultivars of viburnums, and they're sucking the sap right out of them. And I often see that during hotter, drier weather. So why that is a possibility that your viburnums are suffering from a element deficiency, it's not the most likely cause. So I would take a look and again, certainly send a picture to one of our 3 extension offices, which will be highlighted at the end of this broadcast. And if they can't look at it and tell, they'll certainly pass it along to one of us, probably myself. And sometimes a picture's enough to figure it out. Other times, maybe a stop is in order to be certain of it. You know, I've got a question for Amanda right now. And so that's kind of a lead in. So she's aware I'm going to ask her a question. You always give them a lead in, so it's not a gotcha moment. But if I remember correctly from an earlier garden hour, that you were talking about the possibility of beetlegeddon, that we were going to see a lot of May bugs or June bugs out there. And, you know, when they're bad, they're bad. But I was kind of curious because I've not seen a lot of damage yet on them on trees. But I don't know if Brett's going to mention they're a big problem on turf right now, or what's been your experience, Amanda? Because I did not see a lot, and I was kind of expecting to.
Yeah, honestly, we have not gotten a lot of calls about June bugs showing up in places. The sort of insects Armageddon that we're experiencing is grasshoppers, and also blister beetles are starting to become an issue in some areas. I know, John, you covered them in the tree pest alert on, I want to say, like a locust tree, but they are starting to show up as a crop pest out in, you know, alfalfa and forage. So the grasshoppers, though, I was just up at Oahe downstream, and you stepped and just just little tiny hops everywhere. So I know Christine was touring a farm here in Pierre, and she said the farmer had the guinea hens out, and they were working on the grasshopper control. So yeah, grasshoppers are turning into be the plague of the summer.
And you're right on those. I was down on the road by Kadoka that, I hate to say it, but the asphalt was almost red from the crushed little grasshoppers. But I'm glad you mentioned blister beetles, because I've been getting a lot of calls on them. And as you mentioned, I addressed it in my pest alert. But right now I'm getting people that are saying, I went out and my pea shrub hedge is gone. By that, all the leaves are gone. Nobody took the plant up. Or their honey locust trees are gone. And by that, again, the foliage. Now, the interesting thing is the individual little leaflets are gone, but the petiole's still there, the leaf stalk. And so it's kind of like, who took the leaflets? And quite often they don't see anybody. But if they do, I've been receiving pictures and went out and looked at a few, and it is one of the blister beetles. And so I do want to remind, and by the way, almost all these homes that I go out to are adjacent to, and Amanda would find this no surprise at all, an alfalfa field. So they tend to be at the edge of towns. And they do go through them. And I guess two questions to you, Amanda, on this is, first of all, you might want to clue everybody in, why do we call them blister beetles? and then the other thing, and quite honestly, I don't know the answer to this one. I was just thinking about it. Are these a night feeding insect, kind of like our June bugs that people would find their trees defoliated, but they wouldn't see anybody? Or are these daytime? Because I do find them in the daytime, but I'm surprised how many people say, well, I don't know what's been eating my pea shrub. I haven't seen anything on it. So I don't recall, are these day or night, or they don't care?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of vote for maybe they don't care. Maybe they do some of their heavier feeding at night, because I too, when you go out in scout fields and stuff, like, you can find them during the day. And I think some of it too is like tree canopies. If people aren't really looking for a thing, I mean, you and I look for insects all the time, so we've got the search image. But most homeowners are maybe not going to be taking super close looks at some of the branches that they can reach. But they might be doing most of their feeding at night, but they definitely are present during the day, because we do get a lot of pictures of them when they show up places. And blister beetles get their name because, as a defensive mechanism, they will actually ooze their blood. Insects have an open circulatory system. They don't have veins like we do. And so they'll just like push that sort of fluid out of some, like the joints, essentially, the joints of their body. And that fluid contains a compound called cantharidin, which is a skin irritant. So don't handle blister beetles. I've occasionally had some land on me and they just crawl around and, fly off. But I don't, if you are going to try to like pick them off of plants, like, definitely wear gloves, because they will fight back by oozing on you, and that can be a very unpleasant experience. But we do have about 3 species that are fairly common in South Dakota. One of them is sort of a bluish gray color. Another one is striped, and the third one is escaping me right now. But their sort of characteristic is that they're sort of a long, thin beetle, and their thorax is actually the narrowest part of their body. So their head is sort of, wide-ish, and then their thorax, and then their abdomen, but they're sort of a more elongate beetle. But yeah, blister beetles.
And I don't remember the name of it either, but there's one that's almost black.
Yeah.
And that's the other one. By the way, typically these are slow moving adults. Mm-hmm. And if you're slow moving, that means you're probably pretty well defended, because nobody's going to bother you. And by the way, I do get the occasion too where someone is out mowing their lawn next to an alfalfa field and pea shrubs and that, and they smack something on their neck, and it can end up looking like poison ivy. It does get the name blister beetle for a darn good reason. And so again, you'll find them out now. And by the way, the other problem they have is that if it is baled in the alfalfa and a horse eats it, it can be deadly to horses. And while we're speaking of critters, I saw someone popped up and said, I think if I read it right, guinea hens are going for $30 to $40 a piece right now.
Grasshopper inflation. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Everything's going up. There's probably a guinea hen shortage. There is for everything else right now. I will say from personal experience, Rhode Island Reds are darn good at grasshoppers too. Just about, at least most of the chickens that I've seen are just as happy as could be, chomping those down as well. So you may not have to go to that high price. I would hate to think that now we're going to have drive-by guinea hen ripoffs where people are stealing them out of yards and that. But, you know, chickens were darn good to go out there and go for grasshoppers too. And I should mention, and Amanda can jump on it too, is if we have a wet spring, which we all wish we had, those little nymph grasshoppers are very susceptible to cold, wet weather. And I know everybody would be sad about that, but we often get a pretty good die-off. But this year, we didn't get that, did we, Amanda?
No, there has been like no die-off of tiny grasshoppers, and like so the ones that overwintered are hatching, and then like the hatch is just continuing. You know, we're gonna have overlapping generations here. You know, I still have very small ones in my yard. I'm starting to get some more medium-sized ones as they develop, but I also have like a flock of really happy robins too. The birds are having a great time with them, but there are a ton. But John, there's a question for you that asks if a honey locust can survive if the lead has died.
And I saw that. I wasn't sure if they meant if the leaves have died or if the lead had died. So I'll answer both. If your honey locust has been stripped of its leaves because of the blister beetles, and I've seen them strip an entire honey locust in 3 nights. I mean, they're pretty good at it. In Pierre, by the way. If it's that, yes, the honey locust will come back. Now, the problem is if they put another set of leaves out, it's going to be hot and dry. And so they're going to be stressed. But even without leaves, water them. If the question was if the lead has died, the major stem, it may live, but the question I'd have is why did the lead die? One problem we have is that not all our honey locust trees are reliably hardy for South Dakota. And they saw some die off in Nebraska because of the fluctuating temperatures we had in the fall. And that many remember we had a mild October, then the temperatures dropped right off the screen. And then it got up to the 80s again in eastern South Dakota in early November. And that's a good setup for a lot of canker problems with honey locusts. And so if the reason the lead died is we're now getting nectaria cankers, one of the more common ones in it, then no. You're not going to have much of a tree left. So the question I would come back into is, well, why did the lead die? And again, if it's a disease issue, well, it may survive, but not really become an attractive tree again. And this gets back to a good reminder to everybody in that not only do we want to choose trees that fit our hardiness zones, which for the most part is hardiness zone 4 in our state, for our state. Do keep in mind that hardiness zones are based upon a very limited pool of information, and that is your minimum January temperature. And as everyone knows here, midwinters don't kill a lot of plants. It's our falls and springs. You know, when people say, well, it got down to minus 25 in January, fine. A lot of our woody plants can take that. What they can't take is that minus 10 or even that 0 in October. And then likewise, cold temperatures in the spring. So because of that, it's always nice to choose cultivars that were developed on the plains. And Northern Acclaim is a North Dakota introduction of honey locust. And that one does what we want it to do. It shuts down early and wakes up late. And so it is far more tolerant of the temperature extremes that we have. So when you're out there choosing trees and shrubs, don't just look at the hardiness zone. Kind of give a consideration of, well, where was that cultivar developed? And is it well adapted to the plains? Well, with that kind of brings us to an end of another hour of Garden Hour. And we certainly appreciate you all being on and watching us tonight. I'd certainly like to thank our panelists here. I'd like to thank Brett for coming in and talking about watering again on turf. And we certainly appreciate having Anna here. It's always nice for a former student to join in. And that was great information provided. Rhoda, thanks for the potato talk. I didn't know that, that was such a problem with those tubers, that they could actually end up shrinking, if you will. And then Amanda, thanks for jumping in with the questions. And I'm going to put a check mark that your prediction of Beetlegeddon was wrong. And I don't know if, and again, I'm just kidding you because it's the same way. We just don't always know. But your grasshopper claim was absolutely correct. So we'll give you a 1-1 for this year, and we'll keep track of my predictions, which are usually don't listen to any of my predictions because they're almost always wrong. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank the panelists. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. And we'll see you next Tuesday night for another edition of Garden Hour. So enjoy the week. Thanks, everyone.